Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 41st episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this episode, it's going to be very philosophical, I guess, esoteric, and theoretical, but I'd like to discuss two essential elements of our reality, that is, form and emotions, and how they interact one with the other. Um, some of these reflections are not yet fully understood, even by me. I'm still hitting some walls, but um, I'll just take you through where I've gotten to. So, the first important part is first is I'm still struggling with origins or beginnings of things. And so, for instance, the origin of form or the origin of emotions or the origin of vibrations, I have my own idea of how they appeared, but any kind of origin story has to tick certain number of boxes. First one is it cannot not exist. So for something um, to sort of have to be a causeless cause, how do you say causeless cause, which is often the debate that you hear with atheists is okay, if God exists, then who created God? Uh, and you have to kind of explain the existence of God, um, even though there's no one that actually created God, and that is the causeless cause. Is something that cannot not exist. And something that cannot not exist is void, of course, or nothingness. Because how could you justify the fact that nothing doesn't exist? Or that void doesn't exist? But void is already a thing, I would say, just nothing. Complete nothingness, emptiness. Um, Void, yeah. That is something that cannot not exist. Um, because it's nothing. And then the second condition is it has to have certain properties, inherent properties, which which makes it create our reality. And the properties of nothing are very interesting. They lead directly to the emergence of everything in a sort of a funny way. That is, when you're trying to represent nothing, for instance, or you're trying to picture where nothing is, just those two basic questions are the responsibility for creating everything. It's basically nothing trying to figure out what it is, and in the process, it creates everything until it realizes it's nothing. It's nothing really, and then it's okay with dissolving all of it like a dream. But so the theoretical framework is first of all the emergence of form, which is the most important. Well, which is something that I've kind of figured out, but then I'm still struggling with the emergence of emotion. But let's just concentrate on form. So when you're trying to represent nothing, imagine that there's nothing. I mean, okay, we cannot say that this dot is nothing, but let's just assume that it's nothing. If there's no particular reason that nothing should be in one place and not in another place, which means nothing is everywhere. So imagine this entire, let's say that this entire space is now filled with nothing. And whenever you're trying to give nothing a form, also, not just the way it occupies space, but when you try to give it a form, any form that you give it, for instance, a triangle, there's no particular reason why it should take that specific form and not another form. And take any geometrical figure, like a triangle, any triangle, and then flip it in every single possible way so that it is represented all of its all possible representations of that triangle, and you'll invariably end up with a circle or a sphere. So for instance, this triangle here, let me just tilt it slightly a little bit, and then slightly again, and then just a little bit more, and a little bit more. And you'll see that if you just flip it in all possible directions and represent it under all possible angles that it can exist, any kind of geometrical form, invariably you'll end up with a circle. And that is why basically nothing will always take the form of a sphere, at least in this reality where we use concepts, because there's also something beyond concept, beyond words, which I cannot comment on. But let's say the source of this universe that we are in, that is vibrational, and where we have form and geometry, which are all concepts, and which are the limits beyond which we cannot go in terms of our human mind. Every single form will invariably is going to transform itself into a sphere. And all geometrical forms are contained within spheres. And so you could say that the universe are just spheres that are nested one inside the other in an infinite number of dimensions. Now, this means that basically even your human form as a human is contained within the sphere, and that is this is where emotions sort of come in. That is, emotions are kind of the lens that you shine through you, that is all the different versions of you, and you get to experience one shade of yourself. So let's just imagine that in a sphere of pure nothingness, there is an infinite number of yous in all possible forms that you have. For instance, one where you're crouching, one where you're running, one where you're dancing, running, all kinds of different forms. And all those sort of coexist within a single space. Everything is here and now. That is, all of your different versions of you are inside sort of a perfect sphere. And emotions are what determine which version or which form of yourself you're going to experience at every single point of the now. So, and it's quite intuitive actually. When you feel sad, you're sort of crouching and you have your back is hunched and you're sobbing, for instance, or you curl up in a ball to cry. So your emotions have a direct effect on the form of yourself that you're going to experience. And so emotions are just a sort of a strategy to build a sequential scenario where you move from one form of yourself to another form, where you experience this time. So time is directly linked to emotions as well. So energy in motion, or form in motion actually, in a way. And that's what basically creates this time, or this transition between one state or one form of yourself to another form. Otherwise, all of your forms are coexisting. Like the version of you in your body that is running is coexisting with the version of you and the form of you which is sleeping. And that's kind of weird, and it would be weird to experience both forms at once, and it will also be weird to jump from one state to another without some form of transition. And that's where emotions, and especially vibrations, because it's one and the same thing actually, comes in really handy. It's because vibrations, and if you know a little bit about music theory, I'm going to do a separate video just on that. Um, they respond to a certain number of rules for transitioning between chords or transitioning between different vibrational states, which means that when you associate both these, form and emotion, in a very dense reality like 3D, then basically, well, the transition between one form and another, unless you're enlightened and you kind of are able to live in the now fully, takes time, especially if you're dispersed, um, and your emotions are dispersed and stretch into the past and into the future. Like, for instance, you're projecting yourself into what you want to become, and you're still traumatized by the emotions that you suffered in the past. Then your form is kind of locked in here in your present and is not free to go and explore other forms of you, your eternal you, that is just a perfect sphere with all the different versions of your own body inside of it. And so emotions are just a way to sort of put the body, put the form in motion, to put the form in motion and experience different forms. And so, from the point of view of form, there is no good or bad, There's just form. And this is very useful because then it separates the absolute from the relative. There's no good and bad because inside your perfect sphere there is you that is alive, you that is dead, you that is happy, sad. All of those yous exist in that eternal kind of bubble made of nothingness, but that can take any and all forms because all forms are contained within it. Um, and then vibrations. I don't know if vibrations maybe emerge from two of those perfect spheres, um, sort of interacting with each other, because you see that the sphere or the absolute or perfection contains the first vibration. See, if you have two halves of a sphere, then you have a vibration, which, by the way, is the infinity sign if you go all the way. But so vibrations are kind of like, it's almost like if these spheres of perfection were kind of vibrating in a way that they get to experience only a particular aspect or version of themselves. So here, in form, there's no good and bad. In emotions and vibrations, though, there is the good and the bad way to experience a certain form. That is, you're sort of projecting a harmonious or disharmonious, a consonant or dissonant way to put a certain form into action. Very simple example: Hussein Bolt and a racing or a marathon or whatever, or a 100-meter race. A 100-meter race is one type of event and emotion that gets your body to run as fast as it can from one point to another. And that emotion, in the case of competition, is that of adrenaline, excitement, enthusiasm, competition, all of these things. But then there is also running away from a predator. That also sets your body into motion, into exploring the different forms between that you're going to do between running from point A, where there's the mean predator, the big fangs and big horns, I don't know, whatever, and point B, where there's a tree there and you're going to climb into the tree. And so this is where I'm trying to get to, I guess. And what's the interesting part is that ultimately the emotions play a very important role because they will be responsible for the kind of color that you put on experiencing the form of you that is kind of all there, and that is devoid of any emotion, devoid of any judgment. And you can experience the same kind of movements of your body in but in different situations. One where it's exciting and very positive and encouraging and joyful and everything. One where it's the scariest thing in your life. But in both cases, you see the form is the same. The form is your body is running from point A to point B, but the emotion is very, very different. And I guess what we're trying to do also with this ascension and harmonization of energies and vibrating higher, quote unquote, I don't like the point higher because it's indicative of a kind of a hierarchy, but it's more a kind of a way to express all the forms that are possible, express as many forms as possible, but in a harmonious way. So in emotions and vibrations that feel really good, because ultimately um, it's the exploration of form that is interesting. The emotions is just a sort of a strategy to sift through them, and there's no obligation to live through the forms in a negative way. To the absolute, to nothingness, all it cares is that you explore the form, not how you explore it. How you explore it is up to you. That is our free will. I guess our free will is really much more about emotions and whether we want to explore the form in a positive or a negative way, or something that feels good or bad, than the form itself. Another case example, for instance, um, the example of contortion, like your body contortionating in different kind of positions. You could imagine a sort of a contemporary dance, which is really strange, like let's say the Rite of Spring from Stravinsky, which is an opera, a ballet, sorry, a ballet. The Rite of Spring of Stravinsky, which is a ballet. Oops. Now, that is one way to contort the body in that kind of way, to make the body express certain things, to express form in a certain way. But there's also trying to, I don't know, like being beaten by a slave owner, for instance, and contorts your body, sort of twisting in weird shapes and forms. Um, and so it's all about expressing, what we're trying to do is express all the forms that you can potentially express and that exist within this perfect sphere that is your body. All the forms, and but try to make sure that you express them in ways that are harmonious. And that's what dancing is all about. That's what any kind of role playing theater is about. That's what the movies are about. It's about expressing a form, but in a very different way than when it's the real thing, for instance, like being burned at the stakes, or role playing, all of these things. And I think the Greeks, when they devised the Greek tragedy and all these things, was also a breakthrough in like playing around with form, but in a way which is emotionally kind of um, liberating, and allows you to express form, but not in a way that is detrimental. And so the outside, and this is really also a kind of a revelation here, the outside actually may just be a sort of stage, a stage for your form and your emotion to be experienced in. So you have your body, you always have your body with you, and then you have the outside world. You have animals there, and plenty of different things. And so there's your emotional state, which is inside, which you feel inside, and that affects, of course, the form, not only of your own body and how you feel, but also what sort of comes, what interacts with you. Um, and so, in any given situation, you can imagine that there is a sort of an interaction between form and emotion, in the sense that the outside is form, and you always project yourself kind of, okay, what would I feel like if I'd be sitting next to this tree? What would I feel like if I would be here petting this cat? What would I feel like if I would be here sipping a coffee at this table? And so the outside world is kind of an invitation to, um, like an attraction of different kind of emotional states that you could find yourself in. And there's a kind of an interaction back and forth between form and emotion, where the form is, there's always the opportunity at every single moment for you to change your emotion to sort of harmonize the form that you'll get to experience, and the way that your body is going to experience the form on the outside. And you can be sad next to that tree, or you can be happy next to that tree. You can be melancholic next to that cat, or you could be, how should I say, relaxed. And all of those, so there's all of the emotional states are available to you at every single point and every single form, but all all potential emotions are there as well, all potential forms and all potential emotions. And so there is a kind of um, a navigational issue here of how you deal with this inside and outside. How do you navigate inside this stage of form, via your emotions? How can you do that in a way that is, where it feels more like a symphony than your kid playing drums, or banging on the piano? How can we do that? And that's also something that I'm struggling with. Um, Trying to have sort of a, not a control, but um, more of, being more conscious, basically, of my emotions and how they affect the form, and how every single moment is an opportunity for changing the emotion, because that's ultimately what you control on the inside, so that the stage sort of adapts gradually to match your emotion. So I hope this was interesting. I'm, I'll try to do a video about music next, because I think that is a really important topic to address, to understand if everything is vibration, especially emotion, then understanding the rules of how vibrations interact, and how music works, uh, really helps in navigating through your emotions and finding a way out of certain emotions, like a sort of a, just like in music, you found your way out from a certain chord that you may be stuck in, and there are multiple paths to um, sort of get back to something more harmonious. So I'll be doing that next. Don't know when. I just bought an upright piano which I need to tune, so maybe I'll do that once it's tuned. But hopefully, I'll be able to do that quite soon. So talk to you next time, and I hope you enjoyed this one.